The mug that started it all. When I first joined a pet supply store, I was optimistic about the job. The manager seemed friendly during orientation and gave me a tour of the workplace. While showing me the break room, she pointed to a cupboard and casually explained that employees were welcome to use the tea, coffee, and mugs stored there. It sounded straightforward enough, so I didn't think much about it. Later that day, I made myself a coffee and grabbed a mug from the exact cupboard she had shown me. Within minutes, she stormed into the room and demanded to know why I was using it. Apparently, the mug belonged to her. There was no label, no warning, and nothing that distinguished it from the other mugs sitting beside it. Despite that, she acted as though I had knowingly broken some sacred rule. I apologized, switched mugs, and tried to forget about the incident. As the months went by, I discovered that this wasn't unusual behavior. She had a habit of speaking down to employees and embarrassing them over small mistakes. Then one afternoon, I witnessed something that brought back the memory of my first day. A brand new employee made herself a cup of tea and unknowingly picked up the exact same mug. Right on cue, the manager burst into the room and started scolding her. The poor girl looked completely humiliated. That happened to be my final day before transferring to another store. Watching the manager repeat the same performance convinced me that she hadn't learned anything and probably never would. After my shift ended, I packed my things, said goodbye to my coworkers, and quietly slipped the mug into my bag. According to friends who still worked there, the manager spent days searching for it. She checked cupboards, questioned employees, and complained constantly about its disappearance. Nobody knew where it had gone. Looking back, the mug itself was worthless. What mattered was the satisfaction of removing the symbol of countless unnecessary lectures. It wasn't about stealing a mug, it was about taking away a tool she used to make other people feel small. Living next to constant noise. For the past several months, I have been renting a room separated from another room by little more than a thin plywood divider. Because the wall is so thin, even normal conversations can be heard clearly. At first I accepted this as part of shared living. Unfortunately, the situation soon became much worse than occasional noise. The man next door frequently bangs on walls, slams objects around the sink, and creates loud disturbances at strange hours. Sometimes the noises occur late at night when most people are trying to sleep. Other times they happen early in the morning before sunrise. The sounds are often sudden and intense enough to wake me up instantly. The woman who stays with him contributes to the problem as well. On several occasions, objects have struck the divider with enough force that I could feel vibrations from my side of the wall. Over time, these interruptions began affecting my sleep, concentration, and overall mood. What should have been a place to relax gradually became a source of stress. Rather than immediately escalating the situation, I attempted to handle it like an adult. I spoke directly with the male occupant and explained how disruptive the noise had become. I wasn't rude or confrontational. I simply asked for a little consideration. For a brief period, I hoped things might improve. Unfortunately, the disturbances continued. That is what makes the situation so frustrating. The issue is no longer just the noise itself, it is the feeling that my concerns are being ignored. Living beside inconsiderate neighbors can slowly wear down a person's patience, and after months of dealing with it, I find myself wondering how much longer anyone could tolerate such a situation. The parking space problem. A few months ago, I noticed that my neighbor had started parking unusually close to the line separating our parking spaces. At first I assumed it was accidental. Everyone misjudges a parking spot once in a while, so I left a polite note asking her to be mindful of the boundary lines. To my surprise, the problem disappeared for a short time. I thought the issue had been resolved. Unfortunately, the improvement didn't last. Gradually she returned to her old habits, and eventually things became even worse. Instead of parking near the line, she began parking directly on it. Normally this might seem like a small inconvenience, but my parking spot is located beside a staircase leading into the building. Because of the layout, I have very little room to maneuver. I can't simply change my angle or use another side of the space. Every inch matters. The situation is especially difficult because I am currently 6 months pregnant. Within a few months, I will need enough room to get a baby carrier, stroller, and supplies in and out of the car. Even now, climbing in and out of the vehicle is becoming less convenient. When I imagine trying to do the same thing with a newborn while squeezed against a wall, the situation becomes far more than a minor annoyance. Recently I started parking as close as possible to her vehicle so that I could have enough room on my side. I hope the inconvenience might encourage her to reconsider how she parks. So far, however, the message has not been received. What frustrates me most is that the entire problem could be solved simply by staying within the painted lines. Success became the best revenge. 7 years ago, I worked as a technician earning a modest salary. At the time, I was under enormous pressure because my manager expected me to complete a project that should have taken 6 months in only 1 month. The expectations were unrealistic, and the stress became overwhelming. What made matters worse was a coworker who possessed most of the knowledge needed for the project. Instead of helping, he mocked me. He called me names, insulted my abilities, and treated me as though I was incompetent. Many people admired him because he was skilled and experienced. I once admired him too, until I experienced his behavior firsthand. The insults hurt, but they were only part of a larger problem. For years I had been dealing with workplace bullying. I constantly tried to please everyone around me, even when doing so damaged my confidence and reputation. Eventually the pressure became too much. I remember going home exhausted, discouraged, and convinced that I would never escape that environment. A few months later, I resigned and found work elsewhere. The transition wasn't easy, but it gave me a fresh start. I dedicated myself to learning new skills and improving professionally. Over time, I moved into remote work and gradually built a career that offered both flexibility and financial stability. Today, I earn far more than I did back then. Ironically, the coworker who constantly bragged about his salary now represents a chapter of my life that feels incredibly distant. The biggest difference isn't the money. It's the freedom. I no longer wake up dreading work. I no longer depend on the approval of people who don't respect me. For a while, I imagined getting revenge. Eventually I realized that revenge wasn't necessary. Building a better life accomplished far more than any argument ever could. Looking back, success, peace of mind, and self-respect turned out to be the most satisfying response of all. The neighbor everyone dreaded. For several years, our neighborhood had one resident who seemed determined to create problems wherever she went. She constantly argued with people, spoke rudely to children, and drove through the area at dangerous speeds. More than once, I worried that someone would get hurt because of her reckless behavior. The final straw came when she nearly endangered children who were learning to ride bicycles. Watching her race around corners without concern for anyone else was infuriating. Complaints to the landlord accomplished nothing, and many residents felt powerless. As frustration grew, people started joking about creative ways to get back at her. One particularly memorable idea involved building a giant slingshot capable of launching objects across the street. Eggs and harmless projectiles became the subject of countless neighborhood stories and exaggerations. Another prank involved subscription cards collected from magazine racks. Friends helped fill them out, ensuring that her mailbox would be flooded with promotional material. Whether these stories were exaggerated or not, they reflected how exhausted everyone had become from dealing with her behavior. Eventually legal action resulted in a no-contact order. That outcome provided more relief than any prank ever could. Looking back, the experience demonstrated how one disruptive person can affect an entire community and how satisfying it feels when a long-running problem is finally addressed. When business and family collide. My brother and I were always close. For years we talked about investing in property together and eventually developing houses. It sounded like the perfect opportunity to combine family, business, and long-term goals. When we found a 70-acre property, we decided to move forward. Most of the ownership was placed in his name because he handled the mortgage. I contributed roughly $33,000 of my own money and accepted a minority share. At the time, I trusted him completely and believed we were working toward the same vision. The reality turned out to be far more complicated. As months passed, disagreements became increasingly common. Plans changed constantly. Decisions were made without meaningful discussion. Even though I had invested a significant amount of money, I often felt like I had no real voice in the project. The winter was particularly difficult. I spent much of it sleeping in a tent or my car while trying to help move the project forward. During that time I began questioning whether the arrangement was truly fair. Eventually I concluded that leaving was the best option. When I approached my brother to discuss a buyout, I expected a difficult but reasonable conversation. Instead, he reacted with anger. Attempts to discuss solutions went nowhere. The situation escalated to the point where he called the police and demanded that I leave the property. Since then, communication has broken down almost entirely. Requests to discuss my investment have been ignored. Meanwhile, our professional relationship also collapsed. After leaving a job where he was my supervisor, I watched the situation deteriorate even further. Fortunately, I kept records of important financial information. Shortly after I announced my intention to leave the project, shared documents containing payment records were deleted. Luckily, I had already created backups. Those records may prove crucial in the future. What hurts most is not the financial loss but the damage done to a family relationship. Business disagreements can be resolved. Broken trust is much harder to repair. The experience taught me a valuable lesson. Even when working with people you love, clear agreements and proper documentation are essential. Trust is important, but trust alone is not a business plan.